Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is Alpha Century as always, and we are going to be here today with a deck tech for the memeiest top tier deck I've seen in a while, and that's going to be Monolithic Visions. So before you get all riled up saying there's no way Monolithic Visions is a good card and can be part of a top tier deck, I think it is, so there. Also, Riverath on my Team Wars team plays a very similar deck to this. And just to give you an idea, I think he went 5-1 last week. No one else got to play. I think it is very strong. It's definitely an underrated card. We'll talk more about the card itself when we get there, but for now let's just take a look at the deck. So what you're looking at is a Cipheron deck for one. It's, I would say, a control deck. The goal is to get to the late game and then make use of our strong late game cards to win from there. And of course Cipheron is going to be the best general for this because his Bloodborne spell is very good at lengthening the game. It essentially heals you for 2 health if you use it on something you're hitting with your face. You can use it to nullify your opponent's 2-drops later on in the game. You can use it to get better trades with your minions. It's also fantastic with a Grapnel Paradigm, which we'll talk about later as well. Yeah, let's just get into the card choices right away here. This is going to be our early game. We're running the Golem package. There's a reason that everyone says they're so strong, honestly. You get Ramp with Golem Metallurgist and Celebrant, and you get Draw with Dream Shaper. There's lots of turns where turn 1 you just play 3 Golems, and lets you set up board very quickly if you get Dream Shaper. Celebrant is also great for ramping. So you can play a Celebrant safely, use it to walk onto the mana tile the next turn, and essentially have 1 more mana than you would have done. So you can play Visions on 8 mana, Grapnel on 5, things like that. And then finally we're running Azure Herald. So Azure Herald is just in there for healing. I think every deck needs some healing at this point. There's a fair few popular decks that will just try and burn you out, and having 9 points of health but they also double as 2-drops. Very flexible option there. And yeah, they're good even going into the late game, or perhaps they reach their best going into the late game, you could even say, which is great for a 2-drop. Moving on, this is going to be the mid game. So Falcius, staple, don't need to talk about it. It gets a lot of value against the weaker players. Most top players will play around it, but you still get to. It's still a very strong tool to have in your toolkit. Thunderhorn. I'm starting to agree with the people on Reddit complaining that Thunderhorn is a little bit too strong. There's basically no downsides to this 4-drop. And it's especially strong in Vet, because they have Kinematic Projection and Lost in the Desert. Now, we don't run either of these cards, but the opponent is always going to have to be mindful of those. And just because of them existing, they're going to make some weird plays around Thunderhorn, which we can just take advantage, using the strong 4-drop minion that Thunderhorn is. It's also going to be our fallback plan against Swarm decks, so Vitruvian typically has a tough time dealing with stuff like Swarm Lilith and Swarm Argeon, and even some other faction Swarm decks that are coming out. But Thunderhorn, you just drop it, and if they can't remove it right away or dispel it, then basically the whole game plan goes out the window. Lightbender, we're running 2 Lightbenders. Yeah, I never want to run 3 Lightbenders. That's just wrong for a tech card. But yeah, they're good against a lot of stuff. A few weeks back, Heal Zoran was popular. I think that was immediately after my tournament run with Heal Zoran, so I'll take all the credit there. It's a good tech card just to have in a lot of matchups. Sometimes you don't need it, sometimes it's useless and you can cycle it away, but sometimes you'll just be happy you have it. And Sandswell Reader, another one of Vitruvian's power cards at the moment, I would say. So 5 mana, bounce something, make an Exhuming Sand. It gives you a lot of flexibility. It goes with Falcius in that this is kind of removal, but with a body, so it's a strong tempo play. It also gives you a bit of power going into the late game, so if you focus on equalizing board and you kind of get to an equal position, if you have 1 or 2 sand tiles on the board, it's going to be hard for your opponent to win in the late game. You can also use it to bounce your own minions. The most practical application of that is going to be bouncing your Azure Heralds. So going from 9 healing to a potential 18 healing against burn decks is great. You can also just bounce your minions to keep a full hand, and say like bounce a Falcius to give yourself the option back. Bounce a Dispelled Thunderhorn against a Stormlist. It gives you a lot of flexibility. Okay, and these are going to be the main spells of the deck, just the tools. I don't think I need to say anything about either. They should be 3 of in every single one of your Vitruvian lists. Siren's First Wish just going to help us trade up with our minions. It's an instant cantrip, basically no downsides to running it. And Blood of Air is going to go with Sandswell Reader to make us never scared of any single target threats. So when they're playing their 4-drops on curve, and then we can remove them with Blood of Air or Sandswell Reader, or even Sandswell Reader, and then they play it again, and then you Blood of Air it. Blood of Air is just fantastic. It bypasses Dying Wish. It gives you a Dervish to either push damage or clear something else with, and it's going to be our answer for a lot of board situations. And finally, this is the last set of cards in the deck. This is what I'm calling the late game. I start off with Mage Sworn, just in there as a tech card, against Vanna, Songhai, lots of those burn decks. Also, it's going to help us against combo decks. The combo decks, like I suppose Ragnar is probably the most meta target for getting Mage Sworned. Also Baconator, Mantra. I feel like this is an important card to any control deck where you're aiming to get to the late game. You need to have a plan for combo decks, and this is our plan. Of course, lots of matchups are just going to cycle it away. Grapnel Paradigm, I would say, is really the star of the deck. This is the power card that really makes it work. There should absolutely be a 3 of in any Cipheron deck, I think, or controlling Cipheron anyway. So it's a 5/5/6 mana, and it's basically a Super Zenrui. It lets you steal all the minions with 2 attack or less on a row. I can't really explain why this card is so powerful, but it's really good. You have to take my word. It's a 5/5, so it's gonna probably eat removal. If it doesn't eat removal, then they will have to trade their board minions into it, in which case it gets value. And that also gets a lot harder because it steals minions with 2 attack or less. Any minions that they could potentially use to clear it, you probably just took control of. It gets even more value against Swarmy decks that like to play a lot of stuff. It's going to be basically the card that lets us swing from, even on board against aggro mid-range deck, and then swing the board completely in our favor. I hope I'll get to show it off in some of the games that I play. EMP, 2 of. This used to be an Amara, but I felt Amara was a bit slow. EMP, we are running the Golem Metallurgist, so we can ramp it out a bit early. It's going to be a good answer to a lot of things on the ladder. Zoran, Arcanists, pretty strong catch-all, and of course it's just going to eat a removal. But that's fair. It's strong in Vet. It's a strong card. You have to play it. And I guess we're on to the main card that the deck's built around now is Monolithic Visions. So transform your action bar into 6 random Vitruvian cards that cost 4 less. So on the face of it, this card is terrible. You can get 0 mana Fountain of Youth, 0 mana Sand Trap, 0 mana Azure Summoning with no flying minions in your deck, 0 mana Reassemble with no obelisks in your deck. Vitruvian has a lot of bad cards. After a lot of playing, it's actually fairly solid as a finisher. With a bit of luck, you'll get probably 1 or 2 good cards. Even just playing something like a 2 mana 6/6 Pantheron. A lot of those cards get a lot stronger when they're discounted by 4. 4 mana Noshrak is insane if you can pull a Blood of Air or a Sandstorm Reader. Basically any good Vitruvian card, if you can pull it, you'll be in a great spot, because the turn after you play Monolithic Visions, hopefully you've drawn back some of the other cards in your deck, you get a draw and a replace, or 2 replaces, and then you can play a 2 mana Grapnel Paradigm alongside a Blood of Air from your main deck, or a 1 mana Blood of Air alongside an EMP from your main deck. It really gives you these huge power turns. Also, the turn you play it, you can expect to have a little bit of board impact too, because there's a lot of cards that cost 4 or less. So you'll probably have something to do the turn you play it, whether that's just developing a couple minions that are reasonable threats, or if you're lucky, getting removal specific for your situation. So it does have some immediate impact. And of course, there are the games where you just not draw and you get Hexblade, Wildfire Rank, and blast them, or you get 2 Fireblaze Obelisks and Whispers of the Sands. Yeah, that just win on the spot. So it has the meme potential, but it's also a very strong finisher kind of thing, because here's the main part of the card that I think a lot of people miss over. It draws you back up to full cards. It draws you a full hand, so you can play as freely with your hand as you like in all stages of the game. Down to 1 card on 8 mana, no problem. You have visions next turn, you're back up to a full hand, and on top of that, it's not that passive of a play. Of course, you do need to have a little bit of space to play visions. It's not going to bring the game back from you if you're in a losing situation. Usually, you can't count on it to do that, so you are going to need a little bit of space, maybe even on board, going into your visions turn. Yeah, and sometimes crazy things just happen. Hopefully we'll get to show some of that off. That said, the deck does win a lot without even playing Visions. Visions is kind of the backup plan to make sure we never run out of cards in the late game. But a lot of games you just win just by controlling and then dropping an EMP or dropping a grapnel and hitting in the face with it a couple times. So yeah, that's going to be the deck. Worth noting, we are a little bit light on spells. You could probably run some stuff like Superior Mirage, maybe even a couple Stars Fury, depending what you're seeing. Yeah, the reason for that is just because a lot of the removal comes in the form of minions. So we have Falcius, Sensor Reader, and Grapnel are all good at removing threats. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned for Grapnel, Cipheron's Bloodborne spell lets you steal 4 attack minions. So 7 mana, if they have a Thunderhorn on board, that's your Thunderhorn. They'll have to answer your 5/5, and they also have to answer the 2/5 Thunderhorn because it's going to be a 4/5 next turn and attack. You can swing a lot of games by stealing their bigger minions. Even stealing something like a Desolator against Abyssian can be fantastic. So always be on the lookout for what you can steal. And the final word of advice, I think, is Mage Sworn has anti-synergy with Visions. So in the games where you're playing Mage Sworn, you're probably not going to be playing Visions, or actually let me phrase that better. If in the games you're playing Mage Sworn is going to win for you. But if the Mage Sworn gets answered, then and only then can you play Visions. So don't be holding the Visions in your hand if you expect the Mage Sworn to stick, because you won't be able to play anything. And with that, I think that's going to be the end of this part of the video, and I will see you guys in the next part where we'll play a couple games. I'll show you how it runs, and hopefully we'll meme on some people with Monolithic Visions.